Glad you're here. I'm glad to be with you. 1988 was a good year. It was the year I turned 5. So let's run down a few movies that had a very strong impact on my overall life. That would be. I got notes. You got a problem? I don't. So you won't. Because I like to go in. I have like an OCD type. We all do. I like to go in a particular order. There was a movie that there was. Save that guy for later. I quote it all the time. Beetlejuice was released in March of 1988, and Beetlejuice is a classic. Period. Beetlejuice is an amazing movie. It's hilarious. It's filled with compelling characters. It's filled with. I grew up loving that movie. Want a cigarette? No thanks. I quit. Trying to cut down myself. I mean, it's perfection. Beetlejuice, fantastic movie, one of Tim Burton's earlier films. I love, I love Beetlejuice. I love Beetlejuice. I had all kinds of Beetlejuice action figures. I, I still have Beetlejuice action figures. They do all kinds of wonderful, fun things. Look up Beetlejuice action figures. Watch Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice. Did I say it 3 times that? Probably. Probably. All right. So there's Beetlejuice. Very impactful. Big. I don't mean just because Ant-Man came out this weekend. I'm talking Big. With Tom Hanks. Great movie. I grew up with that movie. And what better story than a kid making a wish to be a grown-up? We all want to be grown-up when we're kids. Isn't it ironic? And then you become a grown-up and you just want to be a kid? Yeah, don't grow up too fast. Because being a kid is the best part of your life. And you become a grown-up and it's like, oh my gosh, what I wouldn't give to be carefree. But there was the part with the pretty lady. I mean, there was the Little Pickles that always impacted me as a kid. And then when I tried one, I was like, these are good. I think that's when I fell in love with pickles. Is when I tried one of the Little Pickles. And was like, ooh, because it was a sweet. And then the lady took her shirt off and he touched her boob. That was a big deal. And he got a job where he plays with toys and reviews toys. And now here we are living in the age where there's literally grown men, Toy Galaxy, reviewing toys for a living. Playing with toys. Isn't it great? Do what you love. It's okay. You can do it. And no one can judge you. I won't. There was also in July of 1988, Short Circuit Part 2. I mean, it wasn't Hot Shots, so it was just Short Circuit 2, but Short Circuit, see earlier 1986 video. This was the sequel. It was a good time as well. Okay, and then there was we got July, then we got August. Okay, let me tell you a little story. There's a VHS tape coming up that has been referenced in 2 other videos. While I was staying at that Canadian in Canada on that vacation in the Friends of the Family's house, where we saw Predator for the first time, where we ended up getting our hands on this VHS tape, where we saw many of films. It's explained, I believe, in the last video, 1987. Follow the link here. There's no link. What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. But that's where my brothers and I first saw the film Young Guns. There's a second one, both fall in this category. I guarantee you I'll be speaking of the other later. But the first film, Young Guns. Did you guys see the size of that chicken? The first film, Young Guns, is one of the greatest westerns I've ever seen. It's one of my favorite westerns of all time. It is the movie that made me appreciate westerns and a fan of particular westerns. I'm not a fan of the western genre, but when you've got a film like Young Guns, I'll make you famous. I love that movie, especially the second one. Like both of them together. Like the ending with spoiler alert. Young Guns has an amazing cast. It's what made me a fan of Kiefer Sutherland. It's what made me a fan of Emilio! Young Guns is an amazing film, and when we saw that as younger people, it blew our. I remember us fighting over because someone was going to a friend's house, and then who was going to get to borrow the tape because we all wanted to watch it that night. Because Young Guns is an amazing film that I love. Moving on. They Live. They Live. They Live. They Live is a John Carpenter film. The thing about the two John Carpenter films that come to mind that I know of for a fact is The Thing and They Live. Oh, and Hellraiser. We mentioned Hellraiser before. Hellraiser was probably my biggest John Carpenter influence growing up. But, wait, that's Clive Barker. Am I getting them mixed up? That is Clive Barker. I think I might have gotten that mixed up in the other video. See, I don't know. I'm not a reliable source. This is why I'm doing this, because soon enough, I'm going to be senile. Point being, The Thing, I only saw for the first time like 5 or so years ago. Amazing, blew my mind. They Live? They Live I saw for the first time like a year and a half ago. And it blew my freaking mind. Like, I love that movie. It immediately, while I was watching it, became one of my favorite movies of all time. One of the greatest fights of all period. Period, the greatest fight I've ever seen. I grew up dreaming of Obi-Wan versus Anakin. But two dudes fighting in an alley for what, like 10 minutes or something? I think it's like a 7-minute scene. That's the greatest fight I've ever seen on film. Period. And what an amazing film, intellectually and philosophically, and it has so many layers. And I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum? The day after I saw this movie for the first time, I printed out that meme of those words on that picture and put it on the inside of my work safe door. So every day at work, that's what I look at. I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum. It doesn't get better than that. And I'd heard that reference so many times, but then I saw the movie, and I'm like, okay, in context, that's the greatest reference ever, and one of the greatest lines ever. And it's just a wrestler coming up with one of their wrestler lines. But overall, what an amazing film. They Live, recently discovered, impacted me greatly. Amazing film. One of my favorites. One of the greatest ever made. They Live. And they still live. They live on. Ooh, that'd be a good sequel. They Live On. Scrooged. Scrooged is my favorite interpretation of the Christmas. Okay, one of my favorite two. Obviously, you have the Muppet Christmas Carol. That's my annual Christmas tradition. That's my only annual Christmas tradition is the Muppet Christmas Carol. But right behind it is Scrooged, starring Bill Murray. Fantastic interpretation of that source material. Classic comedy. Is that a Richard Donner? That's a Richard Donner film, and I don't believe I'm mistaken this time. The man who made Ladyhawke, that we discussed in the 1985 film. Check it out for your health, because Ladyhawke is amazing. I just got to watch that on the big screen for the first time last week. Immediately after busting my head open on the cement, always wear a helmet. The bike took me down, and whoo! I spent the entirety of it was like my lifelong dream was to watch Lady Hawk on the big screen, and I'm finally doing it, and I'm like dabbing blood with napkins throughout the whole thing, wondering if this was gonna be the last thing I ever did. That's a whole nother story. Perhaps we'll go over it soon in one of the other videos that you shouldn't be watching anyway. But we're gonna stay on topic now, because Lady Hawk's we weren't even talking about Lady Hawk. Another Richard Donner film, Scrooged. Good times. Ooh, starring Margot Kidder, is that her name? Who I just brought up in my 40 video with my teenage years. Because, feet. Okie dokie, Working Girl. Speaking of female body parts that I like. I'm bringing up Working Girl because my mother had it on VHS, and when I discovered that there was a particular part on that VHS, I went, oh. That was one of my earliest discoveries. Because back then, you couldn't just get your hands on porn like you could these days, where you just go on the internet. Back then, you had to either find your brother's softcore video cassette. Oh man, that's another story. I should put that on the deal. My dad ripped that up and I taped it. I taped a VHS tape because he thought that just breaking the thing would... I took it out of the garbage. Anyway, but Working Girl was one of my earliest. I discussed the Tom Waits album cover in my... Don't worry about it. But Working Girl I found... And I discovered a scene. There's a scene with Alec Baldwin and when Melanie Griffith busts him, but there's a naked lady. Let's just say I hope my mother never realized that her tape was always at a particular... Because this was a VHS tape, so the tape was always at a particular spot. But it also had a sequence where Melanie Griffith was rushing to clean her apartment real quick. And in doing so, there's like a long shot of down the hallway, and there she is going by through the doorway. And she's vacuuming. And she's vacuuming. She's vacuuming topless. She's vacuuming topless. She's vacuuming topless. And as a young person, I'm going, oh, she's vacuuming topless. And there's something about the movement of vacuuming. I'm not the only one. I'm not going to judge myself. You can judge me all you want. Won't matter. She was vacuuming. When you're vacuuming topless as a robust female, there's a lot of movement. And then one day, my girlfriend at the time, my future wife at the time, current ex-wife / best friend, she had a job as a janitor at a church. And because when I was a kid, one of my first experiences with seeing boobies was Melanie Griffith vacuuming topless, again, these things stick with you, and that's how they become fetishes or what have you. So I wanted to see her vacuum the church topless. Spoiler alert, I got my wish. She didn't go... I'm pretty sure she kept the bra on, because it was a church. That was the church we ended up getting married, though. So, full circle. Everything happens for a reason. I've had a good life. That's why I'm trying to tell as many stories as I can. Some of them are bleeding into other videos that should be in the other videos. So if you watch everything, you'll get to know me, which you shouldn't, because why would you? You don't care. You don't even care about this. Who cares? These are just my opinions about movies I like that had a bit of impact on me in my 40 years of existence. Almost. I'm going to be 40 soon. Spoiler alert. But that's why I brought up Working Girl. Last but not least, because it's not last or least, the penultimate one I'm going to bring up is Roger Rabbit. Roger Rabbit. I'm going to say two things. Number one, my son and I had the honor and privilege of meeting the gentleman who did the voice of Roger Rabbit at a Comic-Con a few years ago, and I have his autograph, and it was an amazing experience. He was on SNL. No, he did other things. He's been in many... You can Google it. The guy who did the voice of Roger Rabbit. His name is escaping me now, but... He's a great actor, great character actor. Ooh, he was also in Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight. That's what I'm talking about. I met him. Starring Billy Zane, who was in Titanic, that I just saw in 3D last week after I watched Ladyhawke after busting my head open. Like, it was bleeding for like 5 hours. Anyway, always wear a helmet. But the other influence that Roger Rabbit had on me, aside from being a great movie that was very impactful and a huge achievement in cinema history, was not that, but when I was very, 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 very young, again, that movie came out when I was 5 years old, my parents were trying to explain to me what my conscience was. The voice in your head that tells you right from wrong, that tells you what to do. So it was my first experience with trying to comprehend what the voice in your head might mean. And core memory, I must have been maybe 6, lying in bed after they had tried to explain it to me. And all of a sudden I heard a voice in my head. And it was Roger Rabbit. So my subconscious took what they said and melded my first experience with having my own internal dialogue, conscience, if you will, but my own thoughts, hearing them in my head, were the voice of Roger Rabbit. And I got to tell Roger Rabbit that. That's not something most people get to say. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And that movie came out the month I was born. Speaking of month we were born, the number one most impactful film on my life that came out in 1988 was the third and final film that I've brought up twice before, both in the 1985 and the 1987 videos. The Holy Grail that my brothers and I had, with 3 films that changed us forever. Which had Ladyhawke, The Princess Bride, and Willow. And here I am talking about Willow 35 years later. And we just finished season 1 of 3 of the brand new show. How crazy is that? Willow is a great film that I grew up quoting, that I still quote to this day, that my brothers and I quoted, that it's just so many compelling characters, so much fun, such a great adventure. I got to watch it on the big screen recently. No one appreciated it as much as I do. Apparently 80s movies are meant for 80s kids. People today, they're so overstimulated, they think that brilliant filmmaking of its time is boring garbage. I think Willow's amazing. James Horner, I believe, did the soundtrack. That's probably the number one most stuck in my head song of all time. And when I was younger, I thought it was Indiana Jones, because it's very similar to the Indiana Jones theme, which is ironic because Willow was written by George Lucas, directed by Ron Howard. But I'd be like, is that Indiana Jones I have in my head? And then I'd be like, anyway. No, it's the Willow theme. The Willow theme is probably the number one song that's ever been stuck in my head in the 39 years of my life. I'm not 40 yet. Great movie. And of course, back in 1999 at the very first Star Wars Celebration, I got to meet Warwick Davis, Willow himself. I got to ask him a question. What did you think about the Ewoks being trashed on? He told me all about that. I've told that story somewhere. I'll have another All the Celebrities I Met video, which I have to do because I've met so many. I'm very fortunate in the last decade of my life. My 30s were really good. 30s are awesome. 30s are the new 20s. So let's hope the 40s are the new 30s. But Willow had such a huge impact. I shook that man's hand. Huge hands he has. also featured in almost every single one, if not all, of the Harry Potter films that I just last week watched in their entirety with my 10-year-old son for his first time. Such a great experience. See, even to this moment, Warwick Davis, Willow himself, has had a huge impact on my life. So Willow, yeah, that was our VHS tape Holy Grail growing up. Ladyhawke, Princess Bride, and Willow. I think it was Princess Bride led into Willow, which led into Ladyhawke, because they were recorded off HBO or something. Willow. And I just got to watch a season of the show, which is the sequel, with my son this year. At the age of 39. 35 years after the release of this film that has been impacting my life through its entirety. I love life. I love my life. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Either there's a God or I'm him. Because I've seen too much evidence to the contrary. I'm just thankful to be alive, honestly. So yeah, Willow. Oh, right. Because I said I literally started Willow with speaking of birth month. Willow came out in 1988. Willow came out specifically in May of 1988. Willow's release date in the United States of America, which is where I was living at the time. On May 20th, 1988. May 20th is my son's birthday. Some might say, why would that matter? In the words of Kevin Flynn, who my son was named after, he's my son.